Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today, I'm honored to have on the show Jim Szafranski, who is the CEO of Prezi. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about Prezi for those folks who don't know much about it?
Yeah, so Prezi, we are a software company, specifically making software for presentations. And our presentation software is a little different than, say, traditional slide presentations, because it's built on a 3D infinite canvas format that allows you to immerse the audience in the presenter content more in a variety of different ways, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about.
Yeah, with the start of the pandemic, so I started using Prezi Video, and we'll talk about what Prezi Video is, the product before the pandemic. And it turned out to be a very good investment of my time and effort, because right away during the pandemic, I had a huge advantage over other, so I professionally do consulting and training. So being able to, as a consultant, to speak to my clients and use Prezi Video as a much more engaging tool than something like Microsoft PowerPoint or other tools like that. And of course, when I had to give virtual keynotes, virtual trainings, and that was a much more engaging and effective tool than the traditional speakers or consultants or trainers would give with Microsoft PowerPoint. So I have that personal experience, and I give something like about 100-ish presentations a year, so I know extensively how well it works. Can you describe for people Prezi Video and its advantages over typical PowerPoint?
Yeah, so Prezi Video, it takes Prezi and it allows you to deliver it over a video conference meeting in an extremely immersive way. If I start with Prezi, the reason Prezi works well is, again, it's built in a very spatial format, and which is the way our brains recall and retain information. And so what we did is we took the Prezi and we listened actually to our users, is what took us into this world of Prezi Video. In 2019, a lot of our users tend to be at the forefront of visual communications, and they were telling us, "Hey, we're spending more and more time presenting over video conferencing." And so we took that open spatial cinematic format and we brought it into the video screen in 2019, which did position us very well to continue to help users like yourself. And what Prezi Video does is it allows you to actually, instead of doing screen sharing, the traditional thing where your slides take over the whole screen and your face is in the bottom corner, it brings your content onto the screen alongside of you. And so you're more like a newscaster, or probably a better example is more of a weather person, where you can interact with the content directly on the screen. And just like Prezi allows you to recall information because of the visual and spatial nature of it, what Prezi Video does is it improves attention spans by not sending you to a different window for content. Because the moment, obviously, we move to different windows on our screen in a virtual setting, there's a big risk of loss of engagement.
Absolutely. And when we think about engagement, so let's talk a little bit. I wonder if you've studied engagement in your videos, the Prezi webinar style videos, Prezi Video versus PowerPoint video versus traditional Prezi, because I definitely have the experience that when I started presenting with Prezi Video, that people were quite a bit more engaged. And inevitably, I would get a question at the end of like, "Oh, this is really cool technology. I've never seen anything like this. Where's this used?" So what have you found about user engagement when they use Prezi Video?
Yeah, generally speaking, there's a variety of ways you can measure this. Like, are people staying on the call longer? Are they retaining information? If it's a pitch, are they saying yes to whatever you're trying to convince them to? And generally speaking, what we see across all these different avenues of measuring improvements and engagement is Prezi tends to have an advantage in the 30 to 40% range for traditional slides. And this was even proven in a kind of double-blind scientific study by Harvard psychologists a few years back too. And again, it comes back to the fact that you just retain the information better and you stay more engaged.
So when people are transitioning to Prezi video, it's definitely a little bit of a difficulty in doing that compared to your traditional slide format. What do you advise people to do as who want to explore starting to use Prezi video?
Yeah, so the good news is if you have PowerPoint slides, for instance, you can actually import them directly into Prezi Video, and we help get you started with some formats that you're familiar with or content that you already have. I think the key is to keep it simple, right? One of the things we often do with our PowerPoints is we just throw so much information at the document and then ultimately at the user, right? The audience. And so what I would suggest anyone wanting to try to use on-screen content in Prezi Video, beyond just using stuff you already have, just keep it simple. Focus more on the narrative that you're trying to tell, right? We're trying to go from here to there and bring a few key visuals on that you think are the main selling points alongside of you and do that more interactive weather person like presentation. And typically then what you get is you get participation, which is what you're looking for, right? You're not trying to do a one-way conversation for 30 minutes. And so Prezi Video is a great way to just get the participation going. And you do that by a simple narrative and a few key on-screen graphics works extremely well.
Now, when we're thinking about meetings right now, people are heading back to the office and there are many more hybrid meetings taking place than before. What are the specific tips and tricks that you want to advise people to do in hybrid meetings in particular to make their experience better?
Yeah, I think, and so as a background, Prezi Video, we talked about, we launched it in 2019. It was right place, right time to help our users in 2020. It's in use in over 200,000 organizations today. And I think the main thing that we see is that, you know, most meetings, you can always assume there's going to be someone virtual. Right. Yeah. And I think you mentioned specifically hybrid meetings where you have some people virtual and some people say in the office. And you know, the best tips that we see from our users is essentially use the screen well. Again, and so if you can bring the content onto the screen and you know have then it levels the playing field. It allows the folks who are virtual to engage the folks in the room, and it allows the folks in the room to also, when they're sharing content, don't send the virtual meeting participants to a different document outside of the context of the meeting or not. So use the screen well. We've been talking about is a little bit of the on-screen office. Think of the space around you as really the place to have the meeting. And again, because what you're trying to do is have participation and engagement.
Now, how do people best get that participation and engagement through using Prezi video tools?
Yeah. The first thing I think is actually, it's kind of what you mentioned earlier. When you use Prezi, sometimes afterwards people are like, hey, what was that? And so you know, the sort of smile that it brings, the fun that it creates a little bit, you can use that to your advantage. So for instance, we have in Prezi Video, we have a feature called an icebreaker, right? And so you can very quickly like put a question up on the screen as the host. And then you can invite the other participants to, you know, essentially type their answer onto the screen. Or pull an emoji in or a photo. Like maybe your question was, what'd you do this weekend? And someone pulls in just a photo using Prezi Video of Yosemite, right? And so, you know, a lot of times it's just, you know, hearing yourself speak once or just participating once. If you get that in early, what we've seen is that that's a real good way to encourage participation. Because one of the other things it does is if you invite someone to participate early like that and something low stress, they turn their cameras on too. And so keep it easy up front. Invite participation, get the cameras on, and then that's what we've seen works very well. So that's why we have this kind of icebreaker feature to encourage that.
And how do you, within Prezi internally, so within your company, how are you using Prezi Video in a way that you think other companies should be using but aren't?
I think one of the things we do a lot of, which you would expect, is like during our all hands meetings. And so we have a weekly all hands meetings, just a half hour long. and most all presenters will use Prezi Video during that meeting. It's our product, but more importantly, what we're doing is we're essentially, producing something relatively cinematic and engaging for the whole company. But it's not necessarily that hard. As you'll see, you just bring a few key visuals onto the screen, which we allow you to import existing content. And it makes the all hands meeting much more like being at home and watching your favorite show like Ted Lasso on TV or something. And it just creates it kind of enjoyable and with a little bit of effort. And so what happens then is you've got sort of the executive team, the product managers, the folks that show up a lot in these all hands meetings, coming with some of that content, which then lights up, some of the sales team and customer support folks to say, hey, maybe I should try that, and some other broader use cases across the company. But I think that's a great place to start. And we saw that during the pandemic. Fortune, 100 CEOs and executives using Prezi Video during all hands meetings as a great place to start.
Now, when I'm thinking about this kind of return to office and so on, the Prezi Video seems like it would facilitate communication between people who are working remotely and people who are in the room. So do you think that more folks using Prezi Video would help facilitate having more flexibility and help make leaders more comfortable, having people be more flexible rather than mandate a full-scale return to the office?
Yeah, what we tend to see when we ask our users, and the audience, so both sides of things, like how do you feel after using Prezi, either offline like the traditional presentation or Prezi Video? What they say is, I felt more connected with the presenter. When you go a little bit deeper, they said that it felt more personal. And so, to your question, so those are more like facts that we collect from our users. Now, if I get into kind of projecting to your question a little bit, what we believe is that, as more and more remote workers get really good at working remotely and they present a very professional, meeting, conversation, the way they show up. And when you combine that with the fact that Prezi makes that person on the other side feel more connected, I do believe that, we have a real role here to help essentially this employee-driven, movement around, flexible work. I think we can really help power that, for our users and for the industry.
And when you're looking into the future, obviously generative AI is becoming a big topic of conversation. How, if you are thinking of integrating generative AI into Prezi Video, Prezi more broadly, how do you think that will impact your product?
Yeah, we think it's going to make, and we see it already in the versions that we have shipping, make essentially presentations more engaging because you're essentially going to be able to create narratives with generative AI is very good at creating a narrative, right? And as opposed to throwing bullet points at the screen. And so the generative AI will give us narratives that are better. And then when you combine that with Prezi's visual spatial rendering, engine, we believe that not only will there be a lot more and better presentations in the marketplace, but actually the Prezi format will really stand out against maybe a sea of lookalike things and help people present narratives and tell stories as opposed to just sort of an information download.
I think that's a great vision of the future. Are there any last points you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
What we see is that you can do a really good job with virtual meetings, and we're enjoying powering that for our user base. And so the last thing I would just offer is it's available to try for free on our website, prezi.com. And so if you're interested in what we just spoke about, give it a try, and I believe it'll help you in your next hybrid or virtual meeting.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Jim. That was very helpful.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Dr. Gleb.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.